I saved for 1,094 days for my Tesla Model S Plaid, bleeding for every overtime shift and skipped meal. Yet in 11 minutes, my brother reduced my dream to twisted metal and smirked like I was the villain. His words were crueler than the impact. He started to say Mom, and implying they would back him as always. He was right. Until I checked my phone and saw the proof that meant this time, everyone would answer to the truth. My name is Aurora West, but for the last 3 years, I had ceased to be a person and had instead become a singular, obsessive function of capitalism. To my coworkers at Stonebridge Risk and Compliance, I was the woman who never turned down a weekend shift. To my friends, I was the ghost who stopped showing up to brunch because $18 for avocado toast was mathematically irresponsible. To my landlord, I was the tenant who argued over a 5% rent hike with the ferocity of a cornered badger. I had been running on a deficit of sleep and a surplus of ambition for 1,094 days. That was the exact count. I knew the number because I had a countdown widget on my phone, ticking away the seconds until I hit the financial target I had plastered on my vision board. I wanted a Tesla Model S Plaid, not the base model, not a used one. I wanted the Plaid. I wanted the kind of acceleration that could pin your spine against the seat and make you forget, even for a few seconds, that you grew up in a house where you were always the second option. It was not just a car, it was a receipt. It was physical proof that I, Aurora West, could build a life without the safety net my parents, Marla and Gordon, had woven exclusively for my younger brother. The day I picked it up, the air in Greenville, South Carolina, felt different. It was humid, sticky with the promise of a storm. But inside the dealership, the air was crisp and smelled of expensive polymers and victory. When they handed me the key card, my hand shook. I had paid for this with missed birthdays. I had paid for this by eating instant oatmeal for dinner 3 nights a week for 2 years. I had paid for this by taking on freelance consulting gigs that kept me awake until 3 in the morning. Staring at spreadsheets until the numbers blurred into gray static, I walked out to the lot. There it was. Midnight silver metallic. It looked like a shark that had evolved to live on asphalt. When I slid into the driver's seat, the silence of the cabin was heavy. I pressed the brake, shifted into drive, and the car moved with a ghostly electric hum that sounded like the future. I should have driven straight to my apartment. I should have gone to Taryn's house, popped a bottle of cheap champagne, and celebrated with the one person who actually knew how hard I had worked. But the little girl inside me, the one who still desperately wanted Gordon West to look at her with the same pride he reserved for his son's participation trophies, took the wheel. I drove to my parents' house. I pulled into the driveway at 6 in the evening. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long orange shadows across the lawn that my father manicured with religious fervor. The Tesla looked alien against the backdrop of their suburban colonial house. A spaceship landed in the middle of normalcy. I got out, smoothing down my blazer. The front door opened before I even reached the steps. It was Evan. My brother was 24 years old, but he still moved with the loose-limbed, chaotic energy of a teenager who knew he would never really have to grow up. He was wearing a vintage band t-shirt that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Purchased, no doubt, with the credit card my mother paid off every month. His eyes did not meet mine. They locked onto the car. Holy shit, Rory. He bypassed me completely, walking straight to the vehicle. His hand reached out, and I felt a physical spike of anxiety as his palm slapped against the pristine metal of the hood. He did not treat it like a machine. He treated it like a toy he had just found in the toy chest. "Is this the Plaid?" he asked, his voice pitching up. He circled the car, his fingers trailing along the door handle. "Yes," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I worked hard for it." He whistled, low and appreciative, but it was the appreciation of a thief casing a jewelry store. 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds. "Right, let me see the yoke steering." He pressed his face against the driver's side window, leaving a smudge of grease on the glass. I flinched. "Mom. Dad. You have to see what Rory bought." He yelled toward the house. Marla and Gordon appeared in the doorway. My mother was wiping her hands on a dish towel, and my father was holding the remote control, looking interrupted. They walked down the driveway, their expressions a mix of confusion and mild judgment. "Well, look at that," my father said, nodding slowly. "That is a lot of car." "Aurora, are you sure you can afford the insurance on something like this?" I smiled. "Tight and practiced. I paid for it in full." "Dad, and yes, I can afford the insurance." My mother frowned, looking from the car to me. "It seems very flashy." "Honey, very expensive. We were just talking about how Evan needs a new transmission for his Jeep. And here you are driving a spaceship." The guilt trip was immediate, a reflex honed over decades. I ignored it. I refused to let them tarnish this. "Can I take it for a spin?" The question came from Evan. He was standing by the driver's door, looking at me with wide, expectant eyes. It was the look that had gotten him out of failing algebra. It was the look that had convinced my parents to pay for 3 different college dropouts. I felt a cold steel rod stiffen in my spine. "No," I said. Evan laughed, a short, disbelief-filled bark. "Come on, just around the block. I want to feel the launch mode." "No," I repeated, louder this time. "Why not?" He looked genuinely offended. "I am a good driver. You totaled the Honda when you were 18. I reminded him. "You backed Dad's truck into a mailbox last Thanksgiving." "No, absolutely not. Nobody drives this car but me." My mother sighed, the sound of a martyr being forced to mediate. "Aurora, do not be selfish. He is your brother. He just wants to see how it runs. He can sit in the passenger seat if I'm driving," I said, crossing my arms. "But he is not touching the wheel." "Absolutely." Evan's face darkened. The charm evaporated, replaced by the petulant sneer of a prince denied his tribute. "Whatever. It is just a car." "Rory, you act like it is made of gold. It is made of 3 years of my life," I snapped. I did not stay for dinner. The atmosphere was too thick with unspoken resentments. I showed them the interior, endured my father's lecture on the volatility of electric vehicle batteries, and deflected my mother's passive-aggressive comments about how I should be saving for a wedding instead of a car. When I left, Evan was sitting on the front porch steps, watching me. He did not wave, he just watched, his eyes tracking the car as I backed out of the driveway. I should have recognized that look. It was not envy, it was calculation. I drove back to my apartment complex. The high of the purchase significantly dampened, but not extinguished. I parked the Tesla in my assigned spot, number 402, under the harsh glow of the security light. I stood there for a moment, just admiring the lines of the fender, before I engaged the lock system. The mirrors folded in with a satisfying mechanical whir. I went upstairs, showered the humidity of the South Carolina evening off my skin, and poured a glass of wine. I called Taryn. We talked for an hour, laughing about the look on my father's face, planning a road trip to Charleston for the weekend. For the first time in years, I felt light. I felt like I had crossed a finish line. I went to bed at 11 o'clock. I placed my phone on the nightstand, and the keycard the slim black rectangle that gave life to my machine inside my purse, which I hung on the hook by the door. The dream I was having was pleasant. I was flying, weightless, over a city made of silver. The ringing of the phone shattered the sky. I jolted awake, heart hammering against my ribs. The room was pitch black. I fumbled for the phone, blinding myself with the screen. Unknown number. The time was 1:33 in the morning. No good news travels at 1:33 in the morning. I swiped answer, my voice thick with sleep. "Hello, is this Aurora West?" A man's voice. "Official? Flat. Yes. Who is this?" "This is Officer Miller with the Greenville Police Department. We are at the scene of a single-vehicle accident on Rutherford Road involving a black Tesla Model S registered to your name." The world stopped spinning. The silence in my apartment was sudden and violent. "Am I speaking to the driver?" the officer asked, confused. "No," I whispered. "I am in bed. My car is—" I scrambled out of bed, dropping the phone. I ran to the window that overlooked the parking lot. I tore the blinds aside. Spot 402 was empty. Panic is a cold thing. It starts in the stomach and spreads to the fingertips, making them numb. I grabbed the phone off the floor. My car is gone, I said, my voice rising to a shriek. Someone stole my car. We have the driver on the scene. Ms. West. He is claiming to be your brother. The rage that hit me was so intense it almost blinded me. It was not fear anymore. It was a white-hot fury that burned the sleep right out of my brain. I ran to the hook by the door. My purse was there. I ripped it open. The side pocket where I always put the keycard was empty. I did not bother to change out of my pajamas. I threw a trench coat over my oversized t-shirt and sweatpants, jammed my feet into sneakers, and called an Uber. The 7 minutes it took for the driver to arrive were the longest 7 minutes of my life. I paced the sidewalk, my fingernails digging into my palms. The ride to Rutherford Road took 11 minutes. I stared out the window, counting the streetlights, trying to keep my breathing steady. Please let it be a scratch, I prayed. Please let it be a fender bender. But I knew Evan. Evan did not do small mistakes. Evan did catastrophes. I saw the flashing blue lights first. They cut through the darkness, illuminating the wet asphalt. The Uber driver slowed down. "Whoa, looks like a bad one," he muttered. I threw the door open before the car had come to a complete stop. I ran past the police cruiser. I ran past the flare burning on the road. And then I stopped. My Tesla was not a car anymore. It was a sculpture of violence. The front end had wrapped itself around a concrete light pole with such force that the metal had buckled like wet cardboard. The hood was crushed accordion style. The windshield was a spiderweb of shattered glass. The headlight, the one I had admired just 6 hours ago, was hanging by a wire, blinking erratically like a dying eye. Steam, or maybe coolant smoke, hissed from the ruin. The smell of ozone and burnt rubber choked the air. It was dead. My 1,094 days of sacrifice were dead. Wrapped around a pole in the middle of the night, I scanned the scene, looking for the ambulance, looking for the body, because surely nobody walks away from that. Then I saw him. Evan was leaning against the trunk of the police cruiser, his arms crossed over his chest. He was wearing a hoodie I recognized. It was one of mine that had gone missing a month ago. He was not bleeding. He was not crying. He was not shaking with the aftershocks of adrenaline. He was looking at the wreckage of my life with a bored expression, tapping his foot. I walked toward him. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through waist-deep water. The police officer, a tall man with a notebook, stepped toward me, but I stepped around him. I only had eyes for Evan. He saw me coming. He stood up a little straighter, and then he did the one thing that I will never forgive, not if I live to be 100. He smiled. It was a smirk, really, a lopsided, arrogant lifting of one corner of his mouth. It was the smile of a boy who had broken a vase and knew that if he just looked cute enough, Mommy would sweep up the glass and tell him it was not his fault. I stopped 2 feet in front of him. I was vibrating. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to vomit. I choked out. The word barely had any sound. Evan shrugged. He gestured casually to the twisted metal behind him, as if he were pointing out a stain on a rug. "The torque is crazy on that thing. Rory, you really should have warned me. It got away from me on the turn. You stole my car." I whispered. "Borrowed," he corrected, his tone light. "I just wanted to see what it could do. You destroyed it. It is insured, right?" He rolled his eyes. "God, stop being so dramatic. You can just get another one." I looked at the officer. "Is he under arrest?" The officer hesitated. "Well, ma'am." He stated he had permission. He did not. I screamed, the sound tearing at my throat. I told him no. I told him absolutely not. Evan laughed. It was a soft, chilling sound. He took a step toward me, leaning in close so the officer would not hear. He looked me right in the eye, his smirk widening. "Mom and—" He stopped there. He let the silence hang between us, heavy and toxic. He did not need to finish the sentence. "Mom and Dad will fix this. Mom and Dad will say you gave me the keys. Mom and Dad will choose me." He knew it. I knew it. The smirk on his face was the victory flag of a war I had been losing since the day he was born. But as I stood there, shivering in the flashing blue light, watching the steam rise from the corpse of my dream, something inside me snapped. It was not the snap of a breaking branch. It was the snap of a lock clicking into place. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. I was not going to call Mom. I was not going to call Dad. I was going to open the Tesla app. And for the first time in his life, Evan West was about to learn that physics and data do not care who your mother is. As I stared at the wreckage, the smell of burnt lithium drifting into the night air, the most terrifying realization was not that my car was destroyed. It was that the scene felt sickeningly familiar. The scale had changed, certainly. The price tag had jumped from 2 figures to 6, but the architecture of the moment was identical to 1,000 other moments that composed the mosaic of our family history. Evan West was not just a person. He was a natural disaster that my parents had decided to insure with their souls. To understand why my brother could stand next to a $100,000 pile of scrap metal and smirk, you have to understand the mythology of the West household. In our home, Evan was the protagonist. He was the golden child, a title he held not by merit, but by a sheer, baffling gravitational pull. I was the supporting character, the reliable narrator, the one who kept the lights on while the hero went on his adventures. For 24 years, I had watched my parents curate a reality where Evan's failures were merely delayed successes, and his catastrophes were simply the world being too small for his spirit. I remember when he was 22, just 2 years ago. He had decided, after dropping out of his 3rd college major graphic design this time, following brief affairs with sociology and culinary arts, that he was going to be a day trader. Most parents would have suggested a job application. Marla and Gordon West suggested a seed fund. They transferred $5,000 into an account for him because, as my mother put it during Sunday pot roast, Evan has such a good intuition for trends. He lost every single cent in 48 hours on a cryptocurrency based on a meme of a dog. When I brought this up, noting that $5,000 was more than I had spent on my car insurance for 3 years, my father sighed the sigh of a man burdened by my lack of vision. He is learning. Aurora, Gordon had said, cutting his meat with aggressive precision. You have to pay for education one way or another. Ideally, it is tuition, but sometimes it is the market. Do not be so hard on him. He is still finding his footing. Finding his footing. That was the family mantra. Evan was always finding his footing, which apparently required him to trample on everyone else's toes. While Evan was finding himself on a trek through Europe, funded by my father's retirement savings, or finding himself in a DJ career that lasted 3 weeks and cost $2,000 in equipment, I was finding reality. I moved out at 18. I did not do it out of rebellion. I did it out of survival. I knew that if I stayed in that house, I would suffocate under the weight of the double standard. I worked as a barista from 4 in the morning until noon, then went to classes until 5, then studied until midnight. I graduated with honors and $40,000 in student debt. I paid off that debt. I paid it off by living in an apartment where the heat worked only on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I paid it off by wearing shoes until the soles wore through to the pavement. I never asked Marla or Gordon for a dime, not because they would have said no, but because I knew the yes would come with a lecture on frugality that they never, ever gave to Evan. It was a study in contrasts that would have been funny if it were not so painful. I would visit for dinner, exhausted from a 60-hour work week, proud that I had just secured a promotion at Stonebridge Risk and Compliance. I would sit at the mahogany table, waiting for a good job or a "we are proud of you." Instead, the conversation would inevitably pivot to Evan. Evan is thinking of moving to Austin. My mother would beam. Serving the potatoes. He feels the creative energy there is better for his photography. He takes photos with his iPhone. Mom, I would say, unable to help myself. It is the eye that matters, not the camera. She would snap back, her tone sharpening instantly. Why must you always be so critical? He is sensitive. Aurora, he feels things deeply. You are just tougher. You can handle things. Evan needs a little more runway. That was the curse of being the competent child. Because I could handle things. I was given everything to handle, because Evan refused to handle anything. Everything was handled for him. It was weaponized incompetence, honed to a razor edge, and it wasn't just money, it was the boundaries, or rather, the lack of them. The Tesla was not the first time he had taken something of mine and destroyed it. When I was 16, I saved up babysitting money for an entire summer to buy a vintage leather jacket. I loved that jacket. It made me feel like armor. 2 weeks after I bought it, I came home to find it missing. Evan, then 8 years old, had taken it to play voyeur in the backyard. I found it in the mud, ripped down the back where he had snagged it on the chain-link fence. I cried. I actually cried, which was rare for me even then. My father's reaction was not to punish Evan. It was to comfort him, because Evan was crying too, crying because I had yelled at him. "It is just a jacket, Rory," my father had said, holding a sobbing Evan. He did not mean to tear it. He just wanted to be like his big sister. You should take it as a compliment. A compliment. That logic had followed us into adulthood. When Evan borrowed my professional camera without asking and left it at a frat party. He said, "I thought you were cool with it," when he borrowed my identity to sign up for a streaming service free trial and forgot to cancel it, charging my card for 6 months. He said, "You make plenty of money. Why are you stressing over $15? And every time, my parents smoothed it over. They paid for the camera. They reimbursed the subscription fees. They covered the cracks in the foundation so quickly that they could pretend the house wasn't sinking. But I saw the cracks. I saw them widening." I watched Evan drift from job to job: barista, dog walker, social media consultant, life coach. He never was fired. He always left due to creative differences, or because the manager was toxic, and Marla and Gordon kept the lifeline flowing. They paid his rent when he was between opportunities. They paid his car insurance because the rates are unfair for young men. They paid his cell phone bill because we need to be able to reach him. They were not helping him. They were crippling him. They were teaching him that consequences were things that happened to other people. They were teaching him that gravity did not apply to those with the last name West. And I had been an accomplice. That was the bitter pill I had to swallow as I stood on Rutherford Road. I had enabled this too. By staying silent at those dinners, by accepting the half-hearted apologies, by taking the check from my father to cover the broken camera instead of demanding Evan pay me back with his own labor. I had prioritized peace over truth. I had swallowed my anger to keep the family portrait from shattering. I had told myself I was being the bigger person. But looking at Evan now, leaning against the police cruiser with that arrogant tilt to his head, I realized I hadn't been the bigger person. I had been a doormat. The Tesla was different. This was not a jacket. This was not a camera. This was a $130,000 piece of engineering that represented 3 years of my life, where I denied myself every single pleasure so I could own something that was purely, undeniably mine. It was the specific nature of the violation that made my blood run cold. I had told him no. I had looked him in the eye, 12 hours ago, and said, "Absolutely not." He had heard me. He had understood me. And then he had waited until I was asleep, broken into my purse, and taken it anyway. This was not an impulse. This was not a mistake. This was a statement. It was a statement that said, "Your no does not matter. Your boundaries are suggestions. What is yours is mine if I want it, because I am Evan, and I always get what I want." The smirk on his face told me he had already run the simulation in his head. He knew exactly how the next 24 hours would go. Mom would cry and say, "Thank God he is alive. A car can be replaced." Dad would pull out his checkbook and say, "Let us handle the deductible. Aurora, do not involve the insurance company. It will ruin his record." Evan would say, "I am sorry. Okay, I just wanted to see the screen." And I would be expected to sigh, nod, and accept that my hard work had been sacrificed on the altar of Evan's whim. I looked at the crushed front end of the Model S. The headlights were still flickering. a dying strobe light illuminating the wet pavement. I thought about the ramen noodles. I thought about the freelance spreadsheets at 2 a.m. I thought about the shoes with the holes in them. Something inside my chest, a soft part that still desperately wanted my mother's approval, finally hardened into stone. This was not an accident. This was the inevitable, mathematical result of 24 years of zero accountability. If I let this go, if I let them write a check and sweep this under the rug, the next time he took something, it might not be a car, it might be a life. He had been driving a missile through a residential neighborhood. The physics of the crash suggested he was going well over the speed limit. If there had been another car, if there had been a pedestrian, my parents were not protecting him anymore. They were unleashing him. I looked at Evan. He was checking his fingernails, bored. He checked his watch, probably wondering how long this would take before he could go home and play video games. He had no fear, none, because he had never met a consequence he couldn't charm or buy his way out of. Well, I thought, feeling a strange, calm settle over me. That ends tonight. I was done being the supporting character in Evan's hero journey. I was done being the safety net. I gripped my phone tighter. The mom and was still echoing in my ears. Mom and Dad would stand by him. Of course they would. They always did. But they were not the ones with the telematics data. They were not the ones with the police report. And for the first time, I was not the daughter seeking approval. I was the plaintiff seeking damages. I took a deep breath, inhaling the sharp scent of ozone. If I stay silent now, I told myself, the words ringing in my head like a gavel, I will stay silent forever. I turned my back on Evan. I did not look at him. I did not scream. I simply unlocked my phone and prepared to burn the script my family had been following for 2 decades. The golden child had finally flown too close to the sun, and I was going to make sure he felt the burn. Officer Miller clicked his ballpoint pen, a sharp, mechanical sound that seemed to cut through the humidity of the night. He looked at me, then at Evan, then back at the crushed Tesla. His expression was one of exhausted neutrality, the look of a man who had mediated one too many domestic disputes in the Walmart parking lot and just wanted to finish his shift without paperwork complications. Did you, or did you not, give Mr. West permission to operate this vehicle? Miller asked. His voice was flat, waiting for a box to be checked. I squared my shoulders, fighting the urge to scream. I needed to be calm. I needed to be the professional woman who assessed risk for a living, not the hysterical sister Evan wanted me to be. No, I said, my voice cutting through the damp air like a serrated knife. I did not. I explicitly told him earlier this evening that he was not allowed to drive it. He took the key card from my purse while I was sleeping. That is theft, officer. Miller looked at Evan. Evan did not flinch. He did not look like a criminal. He looked like a college kid who had made a goofy mistake. He ran a hand through his hair, messing it up just enough to look sympathetic. She is lying, Evan said. He spoke with a casual, easy confidence that made my stomach churn. She let me take it. She just told me not to scratch it. Now that it is wrecked, she is freaking out about the insurance premiums. You know how women get about their new toys. I stared at him. The misogyny was subtle, wrapped in a brotherhood wink to the officer. But it hit its mark. I am not freaking out about premiums, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I am reporting a crime. Evan laughed, a short, incredulous sound. Come on, Rory. You handed me the key card. You said, and I quote, have a blast. Just be back by 2. Stop trying to throw me under the bus because you are mad at yourself for trusting me. The gaslighting was so seamless, so practiced, that for a microsecond, I actually questioned my own memory. Did I know? Of course I did not. But his conviction was terrifying. Officer, I said, pulling my phone out of my pocket, I have proof. I opened the Tesla app. My fingers were trembling, but I forced them to be precise. I navigated to the security logs. Look here, I said, shoving the screen toward Officer Miller. The vehicle was unlocked via phone key at 11:42 at night. Miller squinted at the screen, illuminating it with his flashlight. Okay, 11:42. So what? At 11:42, I was in my apartment, on a video call with a coworker. I explained. The logic flowing fast. I was nowhere near the car. My phone was on my nightstand. Evan must have paired his phone to the car earlier without me knowing. Or he took my keycard. If I had given him permission, why would I be on a video call while he was driving off? Evan jumped in before Miller could process that. She gave me the card. He insisted. She's just trying to cover her tracks so the insurance company does not deny the claim. If she admits she let me drive, and I am not on her policy, they might not pay. She is trying to commit insurance fraud. Officer, not me. My jaw dropped. He was flipping the script. He was accusing me of the very thing he was doing, manipulating the truth for financial safety. That is absurd. I spat out. Officer Miller closed his notebook. He looked tired. He looked like he did not care about timestamps or video calls or the intricate dynamics of the West family dysfunction. Look, folks, Miller said, sighing. Here's the deal. You are siblings. There is no sign of forced entry on the vehicle. You have got one person saying yes, one person saying no. I cannot determine intent or permission on the side of the road at 2 a.m. He turned to me. Ms. West, if you want to press charges for auto theft, you can come down to the station tomorrow and file a formal report, but I'm telling you right now, without concrete proof that he broke in, the district attorney is going to look at this as a civil matter. It is a family dispute. Let the insurance companies hash it out. But he wrecked it. I gestured to the smoking ruin of my car, and he will be cited for failure to control a vehicle and destruction of city property for the light pole, Miller said. But as for the theft, that is he, she said. He handed me a slip of paper with the incident number. The tow truck is on its way. You two need to figure out how you are getting home. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The system, the one I believed in, the one I worked alongside every day in my career, was shrugging its shoulders. Evan leaned in as Miller walked back to his cruiser to radio dispatch. He was close enough that I could smell the faint scent of my expensive leather seats clinging to his clothes. See, he whispered, nobody cares. Rory. I turned on him, my hands balled into fists at my sides. Why are you doing this? I asked, my voice shaking. Why can you not just own it for once in your life? Evan's face lost the boyish charm. It went blank and cold. Because I cannot afford a theft charge. Rory, I have 2 points on my license already. If I get hit with a felony, my life is over. You have money. You have a job. You can absorb this. I can absorb this, I repeated, incredulous. I worked for 3 years for this car, and you will get another one, he said dismissively. Mom and Dad will make sure you are whole. They are not going to let their little girl suffer. He paused, and then he delivered the coup de grace, the weapon he had been saving. Besides, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur, I already texted them. Mom and Dad, I told them you let me drive it and I had an accident. They are already preparing to back me up. If you try to call me a thief, you are calling them liars too. The air left my lungs. He had preempted me. He had planted the narrative before I even knew there was a story to tell. I watched as the tow truck arrived. It was a massive, rumbling flatbed with yellow lights that cut through the gloom. The driver, a burly man in grease-stained coveralls, didn't say a word to me. He just hooked the chains onto the undercarriage of my Tesla. The sound of the winch was a high-pitched mechanical scream. I watched as the midnight silver metallic body was dragged up the ramp. The front bumper, or what was left of it, scraped against the asphalt with a sickening crunch. Sparks flew. It sounded like bones breaking. My car, my beautiful, silent, perfect machine, looked like a dead animal being hauled away. Evan watched it go with a look of mild inconvenience. Can I get a ride with you? He asked. My phone is dead. I looked at him. I looked at the brother I had defended on the playground, the brother I had tutored in math, the brother I had bought birthday presents for when I could barely afford rent. No, I said. I turned around and walked toward the Uber that had been waiting for me, the meter running. I got in and slammed the door. Drive. I told the driver, just drive. I left him there on the side of the road. It was the pettiest victory imaginable, leaving him to wait for a taxi in the rain. But it was the only one I had. The ride back to my apartment was silent. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a deep, aching exhaustion. I felt hollowed out. I felt foolish. I had thought that buying the car was the finish line. I had thought that achieving success would insulate me from the chaos of my family. I was wrong. Success just gave them a more expensive target. When I got back to my apartment complex, the empty spot number 402 stared at me like a missing tooth. I walked past it, refusing to look at the oil stain left on the pavement. I unlocked my front door and stepped into the quiet of my sanctuary, but it did not feel safe anymore. It felt violated. I dropped my purse on the counter and walked straight to the hallway console table. This was where I kept the spare key card. I had put it there yesterday evening, in a small ceramic bowl where I kept my spare change and mail key. I remembered placing it there. I remembered the distinct click it made against the ceramic. The bowl was there. The pennies were there. The mail key was there. The black Tesla card was gone. I stood there, staring at the empty space in the bowl. Evan hadn't just taken the card from my purse while I slept. He had hunted for the spare. He had come into my home, perhaps while I was in the bathroom or distracted making tea, and he had located the backup. This changed everything. This was not a crime of opportunity. This was not a drunk kid seeing a purse on a table and making a bad decision. This was premeditated. He had planned to take the car. He had secured the means to take it before he even asked me for permission. When I said no, he didn't drive away because he was disappointed. He drove away because he knew he already had the key in his pocket. He was just waiting for me to fall asleep. A cold clarity washed over me. It was sharper than the anger. It was the clinical, icy detachment I used when analyzing high-risk portfolios at Stonebridge. He thinks this is a family dispute. I whispered to the empty room. He thinks this is a he said, she said. I walked into my home office and sat down at my desk. I did not turn on the overhead light. The glow of my dual monitors was enough. I pulled up the South Carolina Penal Code. I searched for unauthorized use of a motor vehicle versus grand larceny. If I treated this like a sister, I lost. If I treated this like a victim, I lost. The police officer was right. Without proof of a break-in, it was messy. But I had something better than proof of a break-in. I had the timeline. I had the missing spare key. I had the digital footprint. I opened a fresh Word document. I typed the date. I typed the time. Evan wanted to play the mom and dad card. He wanted to make this about family loyalty. He wanted to drag me into the mud where he lived, where facts were malleable and emotions ruled. I was not going down there. I was going to keep this in the clouds, in the data, in the paper trail. I am not filing an insurance claim first. I said to myself, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, I am filing a criminal report for unauthorized use. If I filed it as a theft, he could argue implied permission, but unauthorized use that required him to prove he had permission to take it at that specific time. And with the text messages I had sent Taryn joking about how I wouldn't let him touch it, and the timestamp of the unlock, and the missing spare key I would force him to lie on record. I would force my parents to lie on record. If they wanted to save him, they would have to commit perjury. They would have to go on public record and say, yes, our daughter is a liar. I looked at the clock. It was 3:15 in the morning. I was not going to sleep. I started typing. I detailed everything, the time of arrival, the conversation in the driveway, the refusal, the discovery of the missing car, the missing spare key. By the time the sun came up, I would have a dossier that no amount of crying or mom and dad could dissolve. He smirked at the crash site because he thought the game was checkers. He thought he could just flip the board and walk away. He didn't realize I was setting up a chessboard, and I was moving the white queen. Tomorrow morning, I would walk into the precinct not as a crying sister, but as a complainant with a prepared affidavit. I would make the theft official before they could wake up and craft their story. I hit save on the document. The file name was simple, Case Evan West. Let's see you smirk at a felony indictment, little brother. The office of State Farm Claims Adjuster Derek Hanley smelled of stale coffee and carpet cleaner. It was a beige, windowless room located in a strip mall 3 miles from the crash site. a place designed to suck the emotion out of tragedy and replace it with actuarial tables. I sat across from him. I was wearing the same clothes I had thrown on at 2 in the morning, though I had added a blazer I kept in my trunk to simulate some semblance of composure. My eyes felt like they were filled with sand. My hands, resting on my knees, were steady, but only because I was actively willing them to be. Derek was a man who looked like he had been eroded by years of listening to people lie. He was 50, balding, with spectacles that slid down his nose and a tie that had been out of fashion since 1998. He had my file open on his desk. "So," he said, dragging the word out. He looked up at me over the rim of his glasses. "The driver was your brother, Evan West." "Yes," I said, "and he is not a listed driver on your policy." "No, I am the sole operator." Derek leaned back in his chair. The springs groaning, he steepled his fingers. "Ms. West, I am going to be level with you. Familial claims are the absolute worst part of my job. They are messy, they are emotional, and 90% of the time, they end with the policyholder withdrawing the claim because they do not want to get Thanksgiving dinner canceled." He tapped the file. "The police report notes a dispute regarding permission. The driver claims verbal consent. You claim theft. That is a significant discrepancy." "It is not a discrepancy," I said, my voice cool and professional. "It is a lie on his part." Derek sighed. He had heard this before. "Look, if you gave him the keys, even if you just told him to drive it around the block and he took it for a joyride, that is permissive use. We would cover the car, but your premiums would skyrocket, and we would likely drop you at renewal. But if you maintain that he took it without permission, he let the sentence hang there, waiting for me to understand the gravity. If I maintain he took it without permission, I finished for him, falling into the jargon of my own profession. Then his coverage acts as primary if he has any, which he likely does not given his employment status. If he is uninsured, my uninsured motorist property damage coverage kicks in. But more importantly, once you pay out the claim to me, your legal department will initiate subrogation against him personally to recover the loss." Derek's eyebrows shot up. He looked at me with a newfound respect. "You work in the industry. Risk and compliance," I said. "I know how subrogation works. Derek, I know that if I sign that affidavit of non-permissive use, the insurance company becomes a wolf that will hunt my brother down for the full value of the vehicle, plus the city property damage. We are talking about a liability of over $140,000. Derek nodded slowly. "Exactly. If you go down this road, Ms. West, we are going to sue your brother. We will garnish his wages. We will put liens on any future assets. We will ruin his credit score for a decade. Most sisters do not want to do that to their little brothers." I looked at the water cooler bubbling in the corner. I thought about Evan's smirk. I thought about the mom and he had weaponized against me. Most brothers do not total their sister's car and then laugh about it. I said, Derek opened a drawer and pulled out a fresh form. It was dense with text, the kind of legal boilerplate that makes most people's eyes glaze over. "I need proof," he said, his tone shifting from advisor to investigator. "If this goes to court, and it might, a simple, he said, she said, will not hold up, especially if your parents intervene and corroborate his story. Do you have anything concrete?" I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I had already printed the screenshots at a 24-hour copy shop on the way here. I slid the paper across the desk. "This is a text conversation from last night, sent at 6:45 in the evening, right after I left my parents' house," I said. Derek picked up the paper. He adjusted his glasses and read aloud. "Me. Just to be clear, since you kept asking, no, you do not drive the Tesla. Ever. Do not ask me again. Evan Lowell." "Okay, relax, psycho. It is just a car." Derek looked up. "That is pretty clear. There is more," I said. I pulled out the second sheet. "This is the log from the Tesla app. It shows the vehicle being unlocked at 11:42 at night. And this," I placed a third sheet down, "is a screenshot of a Zoom call log with my colleague Taryn Briggs. The call started at 11:30 and ended at midnight. I was on camera, in my apartment. miles away from the vehicle when it was unlocked. Derek nodded, impressed. He took a pen and circled the timestamp. This is good. This is very good. It establishes you were not present, and the text establishes prior denial of permission. But there is one more thing I need. Name it. The telematics, Derek said. The black box data. The event data recorder. I nodded. I had expected this. The Tesla Model S Plaid is essentially a supercomputer wrapped in aluminum. It records everything. Every steering input. Every tap of the brake. The exact speed at the moment of impact. The seatbelt status. The G-forces. I want you to pull the full report, I said. I want to know exactly what he was doing. I want to know if he was speeding. I want to know if he tried to stop. Derek typed something into his computer. I can request the extraction. It will take a few days to process the raw data. But I have to warn you. Aurora, the data is cold. It does not care about context. If it shows he was doing 100 miles an hour in a 30 zone, this stops being just a civil suit. The police will subpoena this data. He could be looking at criminal negligence or reckless endangerment charges based on these numbers alone. I felt a flicker of hesitation, not for Evan, but for the sheer magnitude of the avalanche I was starting. A criminal record sticks. It destroys job prospects. It limits housing options. But then I remembered the smirk. I remembered the absolute lack of remorse. If he was driving recklessly, I said, my voice steady, then the data will simply reflect the choices he made. I am not inventing the speed. Derek, I am just asking you to read the speedometer. Derek looked at me for a long moment. He saw something in my face, perhaps the exhaustion, perhaps the resolve. He slid the affidavit across the desk. This is the statement of non-permissive use, he said softly. Once you sign this, you are formally accusing Evan West of taking your vehicle without consent. There is no taking it back. Once I file this, the machine starts turning. I picked up the pen. It was a cheap, plastic stick with the State Farm logo on it. The room was silent. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the break room down the hall. I could hear the blood rushing in my own ears. This piece of paper was a grenade. I knew it. Derek knew it. I looked at the signature line. If I did not sign, I was accepting the debt. I was accepting that I had allowed this. I was accepting that my 3 years of labor were forfeit to Evan's entitlement. I put the pen to the paper. The ink flowed smoothly. Aurora West. I dated it. There, I said, pushing the paper back to him. It is done. Derek took the paper. He did not smile. He just nodded. A solemn acknowledgement of the gravity of the act. I will get the claim started. We will arrange for a rental car for you, a standard sedan. I am afraid. Nothing like what you lost. And I will order the telematics extraction immediately. Thank you, I said. I stood up to leave. My legs felt shaky, but my head was clearer than it had been in hours. I had taken the first step. I had moved from passive victim to active participant. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A long, sustained vibration. I knew who it was before I looked. I walked out of Derek's office and into the bright, harsh sunlight of the parking lot. I pulled the phone out. Mom. I stared at the screen. The picture I had set for her was from a family vacation 5 years ago. She looked happy. I looked tired. I slid the green icon to the right. Hello, I said. Aurora? Her voice was not a question. It was a command. It was the tone she used when I was 12 and hadn't cleaned my room. It was the tone that expected immediate, unquestioning compliance. Come home, now. We need to talk. I leaned against the side of the building, the brick rough against my shoulder. I am busy. Mom, I have a job. I called your office. She cut in. They said you took a personal day. Do not lie to me. Aurora, Evan is here. He is a wreck. He is crying his eyes out. He seemed fine when he was smirking at the police officer last night, I said, fighting the urge to raise my voice. He is in shock, she shrieked. Her voice cracked, and I could hear the frantic energy radiating through the line. He is your brother. How could you leave him on the side of the road like that? And now he tells me you are threatening to report it as stolen. I did not threaten. Mom, I said calmly, I just left the insurance office. I signed the affidavit. It is reported. There was a silence on the other end. A thick, heavy silence. You did what she whispered. I told the truth. I said, he took my keys. He crashed my car. I am not paying for his mistake. You undo it, she hissed. You go back in there and you tell them you made a mistake. You tell them you forgot you gave him permission. Do you hear me? If you do this, they will come after him. You will ruin him. He ruined himself. Mom, Aurora West, if you do not come to this house right now and fix this, you are tearing this family apart. Your father is furious. We are willing to pay the deductible. We are willing to handle this internally. Why do you have to be so vindictive? Vindictive, the word hung in the air. Justice, to them, felt like vengeance because they were so used to preferential treatment. I am not coming over, I said, and I am not withdrawing the claim. Aurora. I am done, Mom. I hung up. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline dump of finally saying no. I stood there in the parking lot, watching the cars drive by on the main road. People going to lunch, people going to work, normal lives. For the first time, I realized that I wasn't afraid of the truth. The truth was simple. The truth was data points and timestamps and physics. What I had been afraid of was the silence. I had been afraid of the uncomfortable quiet that happens when you stop playing the role assigned to you. I had been afraid of the vacuum that is created when you stop setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. But as I looked at the State Farm sign, I realized that the silence wasn't scary. It was peaceful. I had declared war. Yes. But for the first time in my life, I was fighting for the right side. I walked to my rental car, a beige Ford Focus that smelled like stale cigarettes, and got in. I had a lot of work to do. I had to organize my digital files. I had to prepare for the inevitable backlash. But as I turned the key, I felt a strange sense of liberation. Let them come, I thought. Let them bring their guilt trips and their gaslighting. I have the receipts. The drive to my parents' house in the rental Ford Focus felt like a funeral procession of one. The steering wheel was sticky. The suspension groaned over every pothole, and the cabin smelled faintly of stale French fries. It was a stark, sensory reminder of exactly what had been taken from me. But the discomfort of the car was nothing compared to the knot of dread tightening in my stomach. I knew this scene. I had rehearsed it 1,000 times in my head over the years, usually while staring at the ceiling after a family dinner where I had bitten my tongue until it bled. But this time, I was not going to bite my tongue. This time, I was bringing the fire. I pulled into the driveway. The house looked infuriatingly perfect. The lawn was edged with geometric precision. The hydrangeas were blooming in cheerful clusters of blue and purple. It was a facade of suburban tranquility that hid the rot inside. I walked up the steps. I did not knock. I still had a key, a heavy brass thing that felt cold in my palm. I unlocked the door and stepped into the foyer. The house was quiet, but it was the silence of a held breath. In the living room, my father, Gordon, was sitting in his leather recliner. He was not reading the paper. He was not watching the news. He was staring at the unlit fireplace, his hands clasped together, his face set in a mask of grim determination. He looked like a CEO waiting to fire a problematic employee. My mother, Marla, was standing by the window. When she heard my footsteps, she turned. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her posture was rigid. She was wearing her crisis cardigan, a gray wool thing she only wore when someone had died or when Evan was in trouble. "Sit down." "Aurora," Gordon said. He did not say hello. He did not ask how I was. He pointed to the stiff armchair opposite him. I remained standing. I prefer to stand. Marla walked over to me, reaching out as if to touch my arm. But I took a subtle half-step back. Her hand dropped. "Honey," she began, her voice trembling with a carefully curated mixture of grief and disappointment. "We need to stop this madness before it goes any further. Families forgive. That is what we do. We do not destroy each other over material things." I looked at her. I really looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes. But it wasn't fear for me. It was fear for the narrative she had built. "I am not destroying anyone. Mom," I said, keeping my voice level. "Evan destroyed my car. He took it without my permission. He drove it recklessly. He crashed it. Those are the facts. I am simply letting the consequences fall where they belong." "He is your brother," Marla cried out, clasping her hands against her chest. "He made a mistake. He is young. He is still finding his way. You cannot brand him a criminal just because he made a bad judgment call. Taking a key from a hidden location in my house is not a judgment call," I said, my voice hardening. "It is theft. Driving at high speeds in a residential zone is not a mistake. It is negligence." Gordon cleared his throat. The sound was like a gavel striking wood. "Let us look at the numbers." "Aurora," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a checkbook. It was a leather-bound booklet that I had seen solve a dozen of Evan's problems before. "The car is a total loss," Gordon stated. "I have looked up the value. The insurance payout would be substantial, but the premiums and the legal trouble for Evan are unacceptable. So here is the proposal." He opened the checkbook and uncapped a fountain pen. "We will pay off the loan," he said. "Whatever the balance is, we will pay it, and we will give you an additional $5,000 for the inconvenience. In exchange, you call the insurance company right now. You tell them you gave him permission. You tell them it was a misunderstanding. You tell them you want to handle the claim privately." I stared at the pen. It hovered over the paper, ready to rewrite history with ink and zeros. It was so simple for them. Money was the spackle they used to fill the holes in Evan's character. "I do not want your money." "Dad," I said. Gordon frowned. "Do not be irrational. This makes you whole. You get out of the loan. You can buy another car. It is not about the money," I shouted, finally losing the battle to keep my voice down. I took a breath, forcing myself to lower the volume. "I want him to take responsibility." I said, speaking slowly and clearly. "I want him to stand up and admit what he did. I want him to feel the weight of his actions. If you pay this off, he learns nothing. He learns that he can smash my life to pieces, and you will just write a check." Marla stepped forward, her face twisted with frustration. "He is not a thief." "Aurora, why do you keep using that word? He just borrowed it. He admires you. He looks up to you. He just wanted to feel what it was like to be successful like his big sister." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. He smirked. "Mom, I was standing there in the wreckage, my dream car wrapped around a pole, and he smirked at me. He looked me in the eye and said, 'Mom,' and because he knew you would be standing right here, doing exactly this, defending him." The hallway door creaked open. Evan walked in. He was wearing sweatpants and a hoodie. He looked tired, but not the kind of tired that comes from remorse. He looked the way a teenager looks when they are grounded from video games. He slouched against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "Are you seriously still on this?" he asked. His voice was scratchy. I turned to face him. "You totaled my car. Evan, you stole it, and you totaled it." "I did not steal it," he shot back, rolling his eyes. "I took it for a drive." "God, you are so dramatic. You act like I sold it for parts. It was an accident. The tires slipped. You were speeding." I said, "I was not." He lied. "The road was wet. I have requested the black box data." "Evan," I said, "the telematics will show the exact speed. It will show the throttle position. It will show everything. For the first time." A flicker of genuine fear crossed his face. He stood up straighter. "You did what I told the insurance company to pull the data." I repeated. Evan looked at Gordon, panic rising in his eyes. "Dad, tell her to stop. She is trying to ruin me. If I get a reckless driving charge, I lose my license. I cannot get to work. You do not have a job." I reminded him. "I have interviews," he yelled. "I'm trying." Rory. "Why do you hate me so much I do not hate you?" I said, "I hate that you think the rules do not apply to you." I turned back to my parents. I saved for 1,094 days for that car. I worked weekends. I skipped vacations. I ate instant noodles while you two were taking Evan to Cabo to help him find himself. That car represented 3 years of my life that I sacrificed. Evan let out a scoff. It was a sharp, dismissive sound that cut me deeper than the crash. Nobody asked you to do that, he said. I froze. You chose to be a miser. Evan continued, his tone mocking. You chose to work all those hours. You could have just chilled. You act like you are some martyr. But you did that to yourself. You wanted the fancy car to show off. Do not blame me because you have no life. The room went silent. I looked at my parents. I waited for Gordon to reprimand him. I waited for Marla to say, Evan, that is ungrateful. They said nothing. Gordon looked down at his checkbook. Marla looked at the floor. They agreed with him, in their eyes. My success was a choice that alienated me, while Evan's failure was a circumstance that required their protection. My hard work was a personality flaw. His entitlement was a vulnerability. I felt something break inside me. It was the last tether, the final thin wire that connected my self-worth to this house. Okay, I whispered. I turned to leave. There was nothing left to say. The checkbook was useless. The apology was never coming. Aurora. Stop. It was Marla. Her voice had changed. The pleading was gone. In its place was a cold, steel resolve. I stopped, my hand on the doorknob. If you walk out that door and proceed with this claim as a theft, she said, her voice steady and low, I will call your adjuster. I turned around slowly. Excuse me? I will call the insurance company, Marla said, lifting her chin. I will tell them that I was on the phone with you earlier that evening. I will tell them I heard you say. Sure, Evan, take it for a spin. Just be careful. My blood ran cold. The room seemed to tilt. You would lie, I asked. My voice barely a whisper. You would commit insurance fraud. You would perjure yourself to protect him. I will do what I have to do to protect this family, Marla said. And right now, you are the one attacking this family. If you force my hand, Aurora, I will say whatever I need to say to make sure Evan does not go to jail. I looked at Gordon. He did not look up. He was letting her do the dirty work, but his silence was a signature on the plan. I looked at Evan. He was smiling again. That small, victorious smirk was back. He knew he had won. Mom had brought out the nuclear option. You are bluffing, I said. Try me, Marla challenged. You think they will believe you over your own mother? You think a jury will convict a boy when his mother swears he had permission? I stood there, processing the depth of the betrayal. It was not just that they favored him. It was that they were willing to criminalize me to save him. If Marla lied, I would look like I was filing a false police report. I would look like the fraud. They were willing to destroy my reputation to save his driving record. I took a step toward Marla. I invaded her personal space. I looked down at her, seeing the fine lines around her eyes. The woman who had raised me. The woman who was now holding a knife to my throat. If you do that, I said, my voice shaking with a rage so pure it felt like ice, then you better be prepared for the fallout. I am not afraid of you. Aurora, she said, you should be afraid of the data. Mom, I said, because I have logs. I have timestamps. I have texts where I told him no. And I have the record of him creating a new driver profile in the car's system at midnight. I leaned in closer. And if you lie to the insurance investigator, that is a felony. Mom, it is not a family dispute. It is a federal crime, and I will not protect you. I will hand over every single piece of evidence I have. I will impeach your testimony with the digital truth. Marla's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of doubt. You would put your own mother in jail, she whispered. You are the one teaching him that lying is rewarded. I said, you are the one showing him that if he hurts someone, Mommy will lie to fix it. Well, I am not Evan. I do not need you to fix anything, but I will not let you break me to build a shelter for him. I pulled the door open. The humid air of South Carolina rushed in, heavy and thick. I looked back at them one last time. The tableau of a family that had finally shown its true face. Gordon with his checkbook, Marla with her lies, Evan with his smirk. Do not call me, I said. Talk to my adjuster. I walked out. I slammed the door. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I marched to the rental car. My hands were trembling so hard I dropped the keys on the driveway. I scrambled to pick them up. Gasping for air, I drove away. I did not look in the rearview mirror, but as I turned the corner, I knew the war had just escalated. Marla West had drawn a line in the sand. She had threatened to perjure herself. She thought that would scare me into submission. She thought the threat of mom versus daughter would make me fold. She was wrong. She had just given me the motivation to burn the whole corrupt system to the ground. If they wanted to lie, fine. I would make sure the truth was so loud, so undeniable, that their lies would choke them. The sanctuary of Stonebridge Risk and Compliance was a stark, sterile contrast to the suffocating humidity of my parents' house. Here, the air was conditioned to a crisp 68 degrees. Here, the walls were glass and steel, transparent and unforgiving. Here, feelings did not matter, only risk assessments, compliance matrices, and mitigation strategies mattered. I sat in Taryn Briggs's office, staring at a Newton's cradle clicking back and forth on her desk. Click, clack, click, clack. It was the only sound in the room besides my own jagged breathing. Taryn was more than a coworker. She was the kind of friend who would help you bury a body, but she would also lecture you on why you chose a shovel with poor ergonomic design. She sat opposite me, her posture perfect, her eyes sharp behind designer frames. She had listened to the entire sordid saga, the crash, the smirk, the confrontation, and finally, my mother's threat to commit perjury without interrupting once. When I finished, she did not offer me a tissue. She did not say, "Oh, honey, that is terrible." She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk, and looked at me with the intensity of a surgeon evaluating a trauma patient. "Okay," she said. Her voice was clipped and professional. "Let us strip the emotion out of this. Your mother is playing a game of chicken. She is betting that her willingness to lie is stronger than your willingness to expose her. She is banking on the fact that you are the good daughter who will not send her mom to prison." I looked at my hands. I do not want to send her to prison. "Taryn, I just want Evan to pay for the car." Taryn shook her head. "Wrong. You want the truth to be the baseline. And right now, the truth is under attack. If Marla lies to the adjuster, and you do not counter it with hard evidence, you lose. You lose the money. You lose the car. And you lose your standing in that family forever. You become the liar." She spun her chair around to face her dual monitors. "So, let us weaponize your compliance training," she said. "You are a risk analyst. Rory, act like one. The car is a Tesla Model S Plaid. It is basically a rolling server farm. You told me you have the unlock logs. That is cute, but that is surface-level stuff. We need to go deeper." She opened a blank document and started typing. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. "Did you request the raw JSON data?" she asked. I blinked. "The what? The JSON files?" Taryn said, not looking up. "The app gives you a user-friendly interface. It tells you door unlocked. But the back-end data, the raw telemetry that goes to the Tesla servers, that tells you everything. It tells you which phone key was used. It tells you the exact GPS coordinates down to the inch. It tells you the weight in the driver's seat." "Weight?" I asked. "Seat sensors," Taryn said. "If the driver weighs 180 pounds and you weigh 130, the airbag system registers that to adjust deployment force. If we can pull the occupant classification data for the time of the crash, we can prove physically that it was not you in the seat, which supports your alibi. But more importantly, we can prove when the driver entered the vehicle." She paused and looked at me. "But the real question is how he started it. You said he took the key card, but modern thieves, or in this case, entitled brothers, usually want convenience. Did you check the driver profiles?" I frowned. I had not looked at the profile since I set mine up on day one. I pulled my phone out. "Open the app," Taryn commanded. "Go to Controls, then Settings, then Drivers." I navigated through the menu. My thumb hovered over the screen. I felt a strange reluctance. like I was about to open a door in my house that I knew an intruder was hiding behind. I tapped the icon. The list populated: Aurora, valet mode, and there, right at the bottom, a third entry, Evan. I felt a chill crawl up my spine that had nothing to do with the office air conditioning. I stared at the name. It looked innocuous. Just 4 letters in a sans serif font, but its presence was a violation so profound it made me nauseous. He made a profile. I whispered. Taryn spun her chair back around. Show me. I held up the phone. She nodded grimly. Of course he did. He did not just want to drive it. He wanted to own it. He wanted his seat position saved. He wanted his mirror settings saved. He wanted the car to greet him by name. She took the phone from my hand and tapped on the profile. Look at the creation date, she said, pointing to the gray text under the name. Created yesterday, 11:15 p.m. I did the math in my head. 11:15 at night. That was 15 minutes before my call with Taryn started. That was 30 minutes before the car was unlocked and driven away. He was in the car before he took it. I realized. Taryn nodded, or he was within Bluetooth range. He paired his phone as a key. See this icon next to his name? That means a mobile device is authorized. He did not just steal the plastic card. Rory, he hacked your car. He used the card to get in initially, probably while you were in the shower or making dinner, and he authorized his own phone so he could come back later without needing the card. My stomach dropped. This was premeditated. This was not a drunken impulse at 2 a.m. He had planned this. He had set up his access while I was in the next room. Oblivious. This destroys the "I just borrowed it" defense, Taryn said, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the hunt. This proves intent. He bypassed security protocols. He created a user account without administrative privilege, which means he must have used your main screen while the car was unlocked to authorize himself. She handed the phone back to me. Take a screenshot, she ordered, right now, before he realizes you know and tries to delete it remotely. I took the screenshot. Then I took another. Then I screen recorded the entire menu navigation to prove it was not a doctored image. Okay, Taryn said. Satisfied. We have the digital fingerprint. Now we need the visual. Where was the car parked? My apartment complex. I said. Spot 402. Covered parking. No. Open lot. Cameras. I thought about it. The complex was decent, but not high security. There was a gate. There were cameras at the entrance. There is a camera at the main gate, I said, and I paused. Mrs. Higgins. Who is Mrs. Higgins? My neighbor in Unit 104. She is a retiree with too much time and a paranoid fear of package thieves. She has a video doorbell, and she has a camera pointed at her parking spot, which is 2 spots down from mine. Taryn smiled. It was a predatory smile. God bless the paranoid retirees, she said. She turned back to her keyboard. We are going to draft 2 emails. One to your property management company, formally requesting the gate footage for the time frame of 11 o'clock at night to 1 o'clock in the morning. We will cite the police report number so they know it is an active investigation. They might push back without a subpoena, but usually, if you use enough legal jargon, they comply just to avoid hassle. And the second email I asked, to Mrs. Higgins? No, Taryn said. You are going to bake Mrs. Higgins a pie or buy her a very nice bottle of sherry, and you are going to ask her nicely, but we need to draft a preservation letter for your own records, noting that you have requested this evidence, just in case your brother's lawyer tries to argue later that you tampered with it. I watched her type. She was drafting the request to the property manager with terrifying speed. To whom it may concern, please be advised that an incident of grand larceny and vehicular destruction occurred on the premises. We formally request preservation of all surveillance footage. Failure to preserve this evidence may result in spoliation sanctions. Spoliation. I repeated. I haven't heard that word since college. It scares people. Taryn said. It sounds expensive. She hit print. The laser printer in the corner whirred to life. Here is the plan, Taryn said, handing me the warm sheet of paper. You are going to send this, then you are going to get that footage. If we can get video of him approaching the car, alone, sneaking around like a thief. That pairs with the profile creation time. It paints a picture. Rory. It turns, he said, she said, into, he plotted, he executed. I looked at the document. It felt heavy. It felt like a weapon. What if Mom follows through? I asked quietly. What if she tells the adjuster I gave him permission? Taryn leaned back, crossing her legs. Then you show the adjuster the profile creation log. You ask the adjuster, if I gave him permission at 11:45 as my mother claims, why did he feel the need to covertly authorize his phone and create a hidden profile 30 minutes prior? Permission implies trust. Hacking implies deceit. The two narratives do not fit together. The data contradicts her lie. She looked me dead in the eye. Rory, stop trying to win the argument with your parents. You cannot win that. They are operating on emotion and guilt. You cannot logic someone out of a position they did not logic themselves into. She pointed at the paper in my hand. You win this in the file. You win this with the adjuster. You win this with the police. Let the data be the bad guy. You do not have to be the vindictive sister. You are just the person pointing at the timestamps. I am sorry. Mom, I would love to help, but the server logs say he stole it. I took a deep breath. She was right. I had been trying to get them to admit they were wrong. I had been trying to get an apology. That was a waste of energy. I did not need their apology. I needed their defeat. I stood up. I feel I paused, searching for the word. Cold Taryn suggested, focused. I said, good. She said, now go get that footage. And for God's sake, change your Tesla password and enable PIN to drive. I walked out of her office. The hum of the Stonebridge floor felt different now. Before, it was just background noise. Now, it felt like a rhythm I could march to. I went to my desk and sat down. I opened my personal email. I attached the letter Taryn had drafted. I typed in the address for the property manager. Subject urgent. Evidence preservation request. Unit 402. I hit send. Then I opened the Tesla app again. I looked at the Evan profile one last time. He had set his seat preference to low reclined. He had set the acceleration mode to Plaid. He had set the steering to sport. He had customized the instrument of his own destruction. I went to the security settings. I found the option Taryn mentioned, PIN to drive. I set a 4-digit code. Then I went to the driver list. I tapped on Evan. The delete button was red. It was tempting. It would be so satisfying to wipe him from the system, to erase his name from my car. But I stopped. No, that was evidence. I left the profile there. It was a tombstone now. A digital monument to his arrogance. I grabbed my bag. I had to go see Mrs. Higgins. I hoped she liked Merlot, because I was going to buy the most expensive bottle I could find. As I walked to the elevator, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Evan. Dad says you are being a bitch. Just drop it, Rory. You have plenty of money. I stared at the message. A day ago. That would have made me cry. It would have made me question myself. Now I took a screenshot. Added to folder case Evan West. I did not reply. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. The doors closed, sealing me in. I watched the numbers count down. 3, 2, 1, ground floor. I was done negotiating. The investigation had officially begun. The modern workplace is designed to be a soundproof box. But scandal has a way of traveling through HVAC systems and glass walls. I walked into Stonebridge Risk and Compliance at 8 in the morning on Tuesday, armed with a venti black coffee and a determination to bury myself in spreadsheets until my eyes bled. I needed the numbness of data. I needed the predictable, linear world of risk assessment where A plus B always equaled C. But the atmosphere on the 4th floor was wrong. Usually, the office hummed with the low murmur of phone calls and the clicking of keyboards. Today, the silence was heavy. It was the kind of silence that happens when a conversation stops abruptly because the subject of that conversation has just walked into the room. I passed the cubicle of Marcus, a junior analyst I had mentored for 6 months. He was looking at his phone, hiding it under his desk. When he saw me, he flinched and shoved the device into his pocket. "Good morning, Rory," he said, his voice a little too high. a little too bright. "Morning, Marcus," I said, slowing down. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah. Yep. Totally fine. Just checking the weather." I walked to my office, the skin on the back of my neck prickling. I sat down and unlocked my computer. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that the crash had left me hypersensitive. Then my phone buzzed. It was not a text. It was a notification from Facebook. I had not posted on Facebook in 2 years, keeping my profile active only to see photos of my cousin's babies. "Evan West tagged you in a post." My stomach turned over. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. I knew, with sickening certainty, that whatever was on the other side of that notification was going to hurt. I opened it. It was a long post, a manifesto of victimhood. "I am not one to air dirty laundry," Evan wrote, which was the first lie. "But I am just so heartbroken today. My own sister, someone I have looked up to my whole life, is trying to ruin me over a simple accident. I borrowed her car with permission, or so I thought, and the roads were slick. I could have died. I am traumatized. But instead of asking if I am okay, she is suing me. She cares more about her fancy Tesla than she cares about her brother's life. It is crazy how money changes people. Please send good vibes. I am really going through it." Below the text was a photo. It was a selfie he had taken in the hospital bathroom, a hospital he had visited for all of 20 minutes to get checked out. Despite having 0 injuries, he looked mournful. He had actually used a filter to make the lighting look more clinical and depressing. I scrolled down to the comments. "OMG Evan, I am so sorry. That is toxic. Sue her back, bro. Rich people are the worst, even family. Glad you're alive. Man, cars can be replaced." I felt the blood drain from my face. He had spun the narrative so completely that I was the villain in a soap opera I did not even know I was auditioning for. He had omitted the part about taking the key while I slept. He had omitted the speeding. He had omitted the smirk. I looked up through the glass wall of my office. 2 receptionists were looking at a computer screen, whispering. One of them glanced at me and quickly looked away. They knew. Everyone knew. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text message from Evan. "I see you saw the post. It is already getting a lot of shares. If you drop the claim and tell the insurance guy it was an accident, I will take it down. I will even post an apology saying I misunderstood. Ball is in your court." I stared at the screen. This was not just family drama anymore. This was extortion. This was a shakedown. He was using my reputation as a hostage to negotiate his way out of a felony. I did not type a response. I did not unleash the scream that was building in my throat. I pressed 2 buttons on the side of my phone. Click, screenshot. I took a screenshot of the Facebook post. I took a screenshot of the comments. I took a screenshot of his text message with the timestamp clearly visible. I saved them all to the folder, Case Evan West. I thought the public humiliation was the worst of it. I thought having my coworkers think I was a heartless monster was the bottom of the barrel. I was wrong. At 10:30 in the morning, an email landed in my inbox. The sender was Arthur Henderson. Arthur Henderson was the Chief Risk Officer for Optimus Capital, one of Stonebridge's largest clients. I managed their account. I handled their sensitive compliance audits. Subject personal matter. Account stability. My hands went cold. I opened the email. "Dear Ms. West, I hope this email finds you well. I am writing to you regarding a concerning matter that was brought to my attention this morning. Several members of our team follow your brother on social media. As he briefly consulted for our marketing wing last year, we saw the public allegations regarding a legal dispute involving fraud and theft within your family. While we respect your private life, Stonebridge handles sensitive risk assessments for Optimus. We need to be assured that the individuals handling our data are not currently embroiled in litigation that could question their judgment or financial stability. Perception is reality in our business. Aurora, please advise on how this is being handled. Regards, Arthur." I sat back in my chair, unable to breathe. Evan had worked for them for 2 weeks as a freelancer, a job I had gotten him, and now that connection was bleeding into my career. My car was a possession. I could buy another car. But my career, my reputation at Stonebridge. That was 18 years of education. That was 10 years of 60-hour weeks. That was my identity. Evan wasn't just scratching the paint anymore. He was taking a sledgehammer to the foundation of my life. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was hot and angry. I stood up and walked straight to Taryn's office. I did not knock. I walked in and closed the door behind me. "Read this," I said, handing her my phone with the email open. Taryn read it. Her expression tightened. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "Okay," she said. "This is an escalation. He is blackmailing me." "Taryn," I said, my voice shaking. "He posted lies, and now he is saying he will only take them down if I commit insurance fraud. And now Arthur Henderson thinks I am unstable." Taryn stood up. She walked around the desk and put her hands on my shoulders. She gripped me hard, grounding me. "Listen to me," she said. "Do not reply to Evan. Do not reply to Arthur yet." She went to her whiteboard and uncapped a red marker. "This is social sabotage," she said, writing the words. "He is trying to create a pressure cooker. He wants you to panic. He wants you to think that saving your job requires saving him. But Arthur, I started. Arthur is a suit." Taryn cut in. "Arthur cares about liability. If you look like a mess, he worries. If you look like a cold, calculating professional handling a legal matter, he respects you." She turned back to me. "We are going to write a memo, not an emotional defense, a compliance disclosure. You are going to reply to Arthur, and you are going to copy our boss, and you are going to say, 'Mr. Henderson, thank you for bringing this to my attention. There is currently an active criminal investigation regarding the unauthorized use of my property. As this is a legal matter involving police reports and insurance fraud prevention, I cannot comment publicly, but please be assured that all ethical protocols are being followed. The social media posts are a retaliation tactic that is currently being added to the evidence file." I stared at her. "That sounds robotic. It sounds innocent." Taryn corrected. "Guilty people get emotional on Facebook. Innocent people follow due process. By calling it a retaliation tactic, you discredit Evan without getting into a mud fight." She was right. I took a deep breath. I went back to my desk and drafted the email. I attached the screenshot of Evan's blackmail text, the one where he offered to delete the post in exchange for dropping the claim. I added a note. "For your context regarding the nature of the allegations," I hit send. My hand hovered over the mouse. I had just exposed my brother's extortion attempt to a major corporate client. There was no going back. The rest of the day was a blur of whispered conversations I pretended not to hear. I kept my head down. I worked. I let the silence be my armor. At 4 o'clock, Taryn messaged me on Slack. "Taryn, check his Instagram story. Don't react. Just watch." I put on my headphones. I opened Instagram on my browser, using a burner account Taryn had set up for investigations. Evan's profile picture was a shot of him looking broodingly into the distance. I clicked on the ring around his photo. The video started. He was in a bar. It was loud. He was holding a beer, and his eyes were glassy. He was clearly enjoying the sympathy he was getting. "Thanks for all the support. Guys," he shouted over the music. "Seriously, it means a lot. My sister is tripping. Man, she acts like I broke into Fort Knox." He took a sip of beer, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Like, honestly, it was so easy. I just used the app on my phone. Like, click, open. If she didn't want me to drive it, why does the app work on my phone? Riddle me that, Batman. She's just mad because I have better reflexes than her." I froze. I rewound the video. "I just used the app on my phone. Like, click, open." I replayed it a third time. He had just admitted, on video, to using his phone to access the car. If I had given him the key card as he claimed to the police, he would have used the card, but by admitting he used the app, he confirmed Taryn's theory he had paired his phone. But here was the catch: I never gave him app access. You have to be inside the car with the master key card to authorize a new phone key. This proved he had been inside the car before the theft to set it up. It proved premeditation. And crucially, it contradicted his statement to Officer Miller where he said, "She gave me the key card." He was so drunk on attention that he couldn't keep his lies straight. I felt a surge of adrenaline. It was not the shaky fear I had felt earlier. It was the thrill of the checkmate. He thinks social media is his weapon, I whispered to myself. I opened my email. I composed a new message to Derek Hanley, the State Farm adjuster. Subject: supplemental evidence. Claim 49202. Admission of hacking. Dear Derek, please find attached a video recording posted by the adverse party, Evan West, at 4:15 this afternoon. In this video, Mr. West admits to accessing the vehicle via the Tesla mobile application. Please cross-reference this with the vehicle logs I provided yesterday. You will see that a new mobile key was unauthorizedly added to the vehicle system at 11:15 at night. This video confirms that Mr. West bypassed security protocols to gain entry, contradicting his police statement that he was given a physical key card. Also attached are screenshots of text messages sent by Mr. West attempting to coerce me into withdrawing the claim in exchange for removing defamatory social media posts. I believe this constitutes admission of guilt and attempted extortion. Regards, Aurora. I hit send. I watched the progress bar slide across the screen. Message sent. I sat back. The office was quieting down as people packed up for the day. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across my desk. Evan thought he could shame me into submission. He thought that by broadcasting his version of the truth, he could bully me back into the silent, compliant role of the sister who pays the bills. He forgot one thing. The internet is written in ink. He had treated social media like a megaphone, shouting his lies to the world. But he didn't realize that every post, every comment, every drunk video rant was actually a fingerprint. He was leaving a trail of breadcrumbs that led straight to his own guilt. I looked at the screenshot of his blackmail text one more time. Ball is in your court. I closed my laptop. The ball was not in my court. The ball was currently hurtling toward his face at 100 miles an hour, and he was too busy looking at his own reflection to duck. I packed my bag. I walked out of the office. Marcus, the junior analyst, looked up as I passed. He looked like he wanted to ask something, maybe to apologize for believing the post. Good night, Marcus, I said, my voice calm and clear. Good night, Rory, he stammered. I walked to the elevator. I felt lighter. The fear of the client email had faded, replaced by the cold certainty of the process. I had followed the rules. I had documented the risk. I had mitigated the damage. I was not just an analyst anymore. I was the architect of his consequences. The phone call from Derek Hanley came at 2:15 in the afternoon on Wednesday, slicing through the quiet tension of my office. I had been staring at a compliance spreadsheet for 3 hours, but my mind was miles away, replaying the video of Evan bragging in the bar. When I answered, Derek's voice was different. Gone was the weary, bureaucratic tone of a man processing a fender bender. In its place was the sharp, clipped cadence of an investigator who had just found the smoking gun. We got the telematics back. Aurora, he said. I gripped the edge of my desk. And it is worse than we thought, he said. I am looking at the raw data stream from the event data recorder, 5 seconds before impact. The throttle was at 100%. The traction control was disengaged manually. He was in drag strip mode. I closed my eyes. Drag strip mode. It was a feature designed for the track, to heat the battery for maximum launch power. You have to navigate through 3 different submenus to turn it on. You have to want it. What was the speed, I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. 112 miles an hour. Derek said. The number hung in the air. 112. In a 35-mile-an-hour residential zone. He wasn't just driving. Derek continued, his voice grim. He was launching. He was doing a performance run. And here's the kicker. Aurora. He did not touch the brake pedal until 0.4 seconds before impact. He did not lose control on a wet road. He ran out of talent on a straight line. I felt sick. If there had been a pedestrian crossing the street, if there had been a family pulling out of a driveway, this changes the classification of the claim. Derek said, this is no longer just an accident. This constitutes gross negligence and reckless endangerment. If we proceed with the non-permissive use filing, we are not just suing him for the cost of the car. We are handing the police evidence of a felony. I understood what he was asking. He was giving me one last off-ramp. He was telling me that if I pushed this button, I was not just grounding my brother, I was potentially sending him to prison. File it, I said. My voice was raspy, but it did not shake. File the report. Derek, he could have killed someone. I hung up. My hands were cold. I felt like I had just signed a death warrant. Not for my brother, but for the version of him that my parents pretended existed. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was Marla. She knew. Derek must have called the house, or called Evan. I did not want to answer. I wanted to throw the phone into the drywall, but I needed to hear it. I needed to hear the denial. I swiped green. "How could you?" she screamed. The sound was raw, an animalistic wail of a mother whose cub is cornered. He was doing 112. "Mom," I said, cutting her off. "He was doing triple the speed limit. He is just a boy," she sobbed. "He was having fun. He did not mean to hurt anyone." "Aurora, please." Derek said they are going to forward the file to the district attorney. They are going to arrest him. You have to stop this. You have to tell them you allowed it. If you say you allowed it, it becomes a civil matter. They will not arrest him for an accident if the owner gave permission. She was begging me to lie to keep him out of handcuffs. She was begging me to obstruct justice. I cannot do that. I said, "You are destroying this family," she shrieked. "You are selfish, cold-hearted. Give me the phone." It was Gordon. His voice was rough, trembling with a mixture of rage and something else. Fear. "Aurora, listen to me," he said. "We are past the point of arguments. You need to understand the reality of the situation. We cannot afford a criminal defense attorney. We cannot afford the lawsuit State Farm is going to bring. That is Evan's problem." I said, "No," Gordon said, his voice cracking. "It is our problem." There was a pause, a heavy, suffocating silence. "We co-signed," he whispered. I froze. "You co-signed what?" "Everything," Gordon admitted, the words tumbling out like stones. His apartment, his truck, the business loan for that DJ equipment, and there are other loans, private loans. My heart hammered against my ribs. "How much?" Dad Gordon let out a shuddering breath. "We are underwater. Aurora. We refinanced the house last year to cover his gambling debts from the crypto mess. If this lawsuit hits, if we have to pay for the Tesla, we lose the house. We lose everything. We have nothing left." I sat there, stunned. The picture finally came into focus. This wasn't just about a car. My parents were financially terminally ill. They had been bleeding money for years to keep Evan's lifestyle afloat, patching the hull of a sinking ship with their retirement savings. That is why you wanted me to take the payout. I realized. You wanted the insurance money to disappear the debt. You needed the claim to go through so you wouldn't be on the hook. "We are drowning. Rory," Gordon wept. "Please, just this once. Help us." I felt a wave of nausea so strong I almost gagged. They had sacrificed their security, their home, their future, all to enable a 24-year-old man who played with cars like toys. And now, they wanted me to sacrifice my integrity to pay the final bill. "I need to go," I said. I hung up before he could say another word. I sat in my office, shaking. The scope of the enabling was monstrous. It was a sickness. But Gordon's words stuck in my head. There are other loans. A cold, paranoid thought wormed its way into my brain. If they were that desperate, if Evan was that deep in the hole, I opened my browser. I went to Credit Karma. I hadn't checked my credit report in 6 months because my finances were automatic, boring, and perfect. I logged in. My score popped up, 720. It used to be 810. I stared at the number. Why did it drop 90 points? I clicked on Open Accounts. Mortgage. Correct. Student loans. Paid off. Chase Sapphire. Correct. Amex Platinum. Opened 8 months ago. Balance. $24,350. Status. Past due. I stopped breathing. I did not have an Amex Platinum. I clicked on the details. The billing address was a P.O. box in Austin, Texas, Austin, where Evan had lived for 3 months last year while he was finding his creative energy. My vision blurred. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. He hadn't just taken my car. He had taken my name. He had opened a credit card using my social security number, which he could easily get from old tax forms at my parents' house, and he had maxed it out. $24,000 of champagne, clothes, and God knows what else, all charged to Aurora West. And my parents. Did they know there are other loans? I grabbed my phone. My fingers were numb. I dialed Evan. He answered on the first ring, sounding breathless. Did you drop it? Did Dad talk to you? You opened a credit card in my name, I said. My voice was a whisper. I didn't have the energy to scream. There was a silence on the other end, a sharp, terrified intake of breath. What? No, that is crazy. It is an Amex. Evan, I said, $24,000. The billing address is your old P.O. box in Austin. I can explain. He stammered. The arrogance was gone. The smirk was gone. This was pure, unadulterated panic. Rory, listen, I was going to pay it back. I just needed a bridge loan until my investments paid off. I didn't think you would notice. You committed identity theft. I said, that is a federal crime. Evan, that is prison time. Real prison time. Not county jail. Rory, please, he screamed. I will pay it back. Mom and Dad said they would help me cover the minimums. The world stopped. Mom and Dad said they would help me cover the minimums. They knew. They knew he had stolen my identity. They knew he was racking up debt in my name. And instead of telling me, instead of stopping him, they were helping him make the minimum payments to keep it hidden from me. They were accomplices. I felt a grief so profound it felt like physical pain. It was the death of my family, not the people, but the idea of them, the idea that they loved me. They didn't love me. They viewed me as a resource. I was a credit score to be harvested. I was a safety net to be used without consent. I hung up the phone. I blocked his number. I sat in the silence of my office. It was 5 o'clock. The cleaners were starting to vacuum the hallway. I was entirely alone. But I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a witness. I opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it the iceberg. I started downloading. I downloaded the credit report. I circled the fraudulent account. I downloaded the text messages where he admitted to the investments. I downloaded the recording of the call. I had just had my phone automatically recorded all calls, a habit from working in risk compliance. I dragged in the telematics report Derek had sent speed 112 mph. I dragged in the screenshot of the mom and text. I dragged in the video of him admitting to using the app. I looked at the folder. It contained enough evidence to put my brother away for 5 years. It contained enough evidence to indict my parents for conspiracy to commit fraud if they had knowingly signed false documents. I felt like I was holding a grenade with the pin pulled. Taryn walked in. She must have seen the look on my face. She closed the door and locked it. What happened? She asked. I told her. I told her about the speed. I told her about the house being leveraged. I told her about the Amex. I told her that my parents knew. Taryn sat down on the floor next to my chair. She took my hand. This is the hardest part, she said softly. What is? I asked, staring at the screen. The part where you realize you are an orphan, she said. I looked at her, tears finally spilling over. They are not dead, she said, but the parents you thought you had, the ones who would protect you, they are gone, Rory. They chose their addict. They chose the parasite. And now they are trying to feed you to him to keep him alive for one more day. She squeezed my hand. You have a meeting with the special investigator tomorrow morning, right? I nodded. You have to give them everything. Taryn said, the credit card too. If I give them the credit card, I said, my voice shaking, they will look into everything. They will see the pattern. It destroys the family. The family is already destroyed. Taryn said, the only question is whether you go down with the ship. She stood up and pulled me into a hug. It was tight and fierce. He is going to try one last thing, she warned. Evan is a narcissist in a corner. He is going to try to hurt you. He is going to try to make you look like the abuser. Be ready. I nodded. I wiped my face. I looked at the folder, Case Evan West. I renamed it, Evidence Final Submission. I was not saving the family anymore. I was saving myself. I went home that night, but I did not sleep. I sat in my living room, watching the door, half expecting Evan to burst in. But he didn't. He was probably at my parents' house, crafting his next lie, protected by the two people who were supposed to protect me. At 3 a.m, my email pinged. It was a notification from the Tesla app. Alert Sentry Mode triggered. But my car was totaled. It was in a salvage yard tow lot on the other side of town. I opened the app. The camera feed was dark, grainy. I saw a figure in a hoodie standing near the wreck. He was holding something, a crowbar. He was trying to get into the car. He was trying to get the physical USB drive from the glove box, the drive that stored the Sentry Mode footage locally, the footage that would show who was driving. He didn't know the telematics were already uploaded to the cloud. He thought the evidence was in the car. I pressed the button on my phone, call police. I watched on the screen as the blue lights reflected off the shattered windshield of my Tesla. I watched as the figure ran. I didn't smile. There was no joy in this. I just took one more screenshot. Tomorrow, I would end it. Thursday morning arrived with the heavy, suffocating pressure of a storm that refused to break. I was sitting in the conference room at Stonebridge, organizing the physical copies of my evidence into a binder, when my phone vibrated. It was a message from Marla. There was no subject line, no greeting, just an image attachment and 3 words. See, I told you. I tapped the image. It was a screenshot of a text message conversation. The sender was labeled Rory. The recipient was Evan. The timestamp was 10:30 on the night of the crash. Evan. Hey, can I take the Plaid for a quick spin? Just around the block, Rory. Yeah, sure. Whatever. Just be careful. Do not scratch it. Evan, you are the best. Thanks, sis. I stared at the screen. The blood drained from my face, leaving me cold and dizzy. I had never sent those texts. At 10:30 that night, I had been in the shower. My phone had been on the bathroom counter, locked. This was a fabrication, a forgery, and it was clumsy. I zoomed in on the image. My analyst brain kicked into gear, overriding the initial shock. The font was wrong. iPhones use a specific variant of San Francisco. The text in the screenshot had slightly wider kerning, more like Helvetica. The blue of the text bubble was a shade too dark. The hex code just a few degrees off from Apple's standard gradient. And the battery icon in the corner was pixelated. While the text was sharp, a classic sign of a composite image where layers had been pasted together. But to a layman, to a mother desperate to believe her son was innocent, it looked real enough. My phone rang. It was Officer Miller. Ms. West, he said, his tone impatient. Your brother just came into the station. He has provided us with digital evidence that contradicts your statement regarding the theft. He claims he has written permission from you to use the vehicle. He forged it. Officer, I said, my voice steady, that is a serious accusation. Miller said, look, at this point, we have conflicting evidence. He is filing a counter-report for filing a false police report. You need to come down here. We are going to sit down with the insurance investigator and get this sorted out once and for all. 2:00. I felt the mud rising around my ankles. This was exactly what Evan wanted. He wanted to drag me into a he-said-she-said swamp where the truth was subjective. He wanted to make it so messy that the police would throw their hands up and walk away, leaving it to the insurance companies to settle the check. I hung up and looked at Taryn. She was standing by the whiteboard, holding a cup of tea. He faked a text thread. I said, Taryn raised an eyebrow. Amateur hour. He is trying to get the police to drop the investigation by claiming I am lying. I continued, I have to go to the station at 2. Taryn set her cup down. She walked over to me and took the binder from my hands. Listen to me, Rory. This is the most dangerous part. Not because of his evidence we can disprove that. It is dangerous because of the room. She opened the binder and pointed to the section labeled Telematics. Evan is going to perform, she said. He is going to cry. He is going to look at your parents and beg for mercy. Marla is going to look at you with those big, disappointed eyes and try to shame you into silence. If you get angry, you lose. If you call him a liar, you look defensive. So what do? I asked. You become the machine, Taryn said. You do not argue with Evan. You do not argue with Marla. You present the data to the investigator. You speak only to the badge and the adjuster. You are not a sister today. You are a witness. She handed me a USB drive. I put the raw JSON files on here, she said, and the video of him in the bar. Keep that one for the end. It is your kill shot. I took the drive. It felt light, insignificant, but it held the weight of my entire future. I walked into the interview room at the Greenville precinct at exactly 2 o'clock. It was a windowless box with cinder block walls painted a depressing shade of institutional beige. Officer Miller was there. Derek Hanley, the State Farm adjuster, was there. And sitting at the far end of the table was a man I didn't know, a man in a sharp gray suit with eyes like flint. He introduced himself as Detective Vance, from the Special Investigations Unit. On the other side of the table sat the West family. Evan looked terrible. He was wearing an oversized sweater that made him look smaller, younger. His eyes were red and puffy. He was trembling slightly. It was a masterclass in physical acting. Marla was next to him, her hand on his shoulder. When I walked in, she looked at me with a mixture of triumph and pity. She thought she had won. She thought the fake text was the silver bullet. Gordon sat on the end, looking at the table. He couldn't meet my eyes. He knew about the Amex card. He knew about the financial ruin. He was a man watching his house burn down and trying to pretend it was just a barbecue. Sit down. Ms. West, Detective Vance said. I sat. I placed my binder on the table. I placed the USB drive next to it. We are here because new evidence has come to light. Vance said, Mr. West claims that this entire incident is a misunderstanding. He claims he had permission. Evans sniffed loudly. I just do not understand why she is doing this, he whispered, his voice cracking perfectly. I asked her. She said yes. Now she is trying to send me to jail because she is mad about the car. Marla reached into her purse and pulled out a printed copy of the screenshot. She slid it across the table toward Detective Vance. Here it is, she said, her voice trembling with righteous indignation. I saw this morning. My daughter lied to you. Detective, she told Evan to take the car. Vance picked up the paper. He looked at it, then at me. Ms. West, he asked. I did not look at Marla. I did not look at Evan. I looked straight at Vance. That image is a forgery. I said. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Evan slammed his hand on the table. It is not. Why are you lying, Mr. West? Sit down, Vance barked. I continued, ignoring the outburst. If you look at the font rendering, Detective, you will see that the kerning on the letter R is inconsistent with iOS standards. Furthermore, the timestamp says 10:30. At 10:30, my phone was locked and inactive. I can provide the screen time logs from Apple to prove no messages were sent at that time. Marla scoffed. Oh, please. Aurora, you are going to argue about fonts. This is your brother. Why would he make this up? Because he is facing a felony charge. Mrs. West, Vance said, cutting her off. He looked at me. You have logs. I opened my binder. Tab 3. Here is the data export from my carrier. Verizon. I said, it lists every SMS and iMessage sent and received on my device for the last 48 hours. I slid the document across the table. Please find 10:30 at night on Tuesday. I said. Vance ran his finger down the list. He stopped. He looked at the paper. Then he looked at the screenshot Marla had provided. There is no record of a text to Evan West at 10:30. Vance said. Evan's face went pale. But maybe it was an iMessage and it didn't show up on the bill iMessages use data. I said calmly, they still leave a packet trace. It is not there. Evan, because it never happened. Marla looked from the paper to Evan. She looked confused. But Evan said I turned the page in my binder. But we do not need to rely on text messages, I said, because the car tells its own story. I looked at Derek Hanley. Derek, could you explain the driver profile creation log? Derek cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable, but he opened his own file. According to the vehicle telemetry, a new driver profile labeled Evan was created at 11:15 at night. I nodded. 11:15, 30 minutes before the crash. I turned to Evan. He was sweating now. A bead of perspiration rolled down his temple. If I gave you the key card at 10:30 as you claim, I asked, why did you feel the need to hack into the system and create a digital profile? And more importantly, how did you authorize that profile? I don't know technical stuff. Evan stammered. I just pressed buttons. To create a profile and pair a phone as a key. I explained to the room, you need administrative access. You need the master keycard present in the center console. But my master keycard was in my purse. I paused for effect. Unless you had already taken the keycard, unless you were in the car, setting up your getaway vehicle, while I was inside my apartment. I wasn't, Evan shouted. I wasn't sneaking around. You are making me look like a criminal. Marla stood up. Stop it. Stop attacking him. He made a mistake with the text. Maybe he got the time wrong. But he is not a hacker. He is your brother. Aurora. He loves you. She looked at me, pleading. Mom and Dad will pay for it. She said, just drop it, please. Do not let them take him. I looked at my mother. I saw the desperation. I saw the willingness to believe any lie, no matter how flimsy, to protect the golden child. And then I played my ace. I have one more piece of evidence. I said, I picked up the USB drive. Detective, may I? I pointed to the laptop on the table. Vance nodded. Go ahead. I plugged it in. I navigated to the video file. This was posted by Mr. West on Instagram yesterday afternoon. I said, he has since deleted it, but nothing is ever really deleted. I clicked play. The sound of the bar filled the small room, the bass thumping, Evan's voice, loud and slurred. I just used the app on my phone, like, click, open. If she didn't want me to drive it, why does the app work on my phone? Riddle me that, Batman. I paused the video on his smiling, arrogant face. I looked at the room. He admits he used the app. I said, to use the app. His phone must be paired as a digital key. I turned to Detective Vance. Detective, every phone has a unique identifier, a UUID. When a phone pairs with a Tesla, that UUID is logged in the car's computer. I pointed at Evan. Mr. West is in possession of his phone right now. Evan's hand instinctively went to his pocket. He looked like a trapped animal. I am requesting that you inspect Mr. West's phone, retrieve his Bluetooth device ID, and cross-reference it with the authorized keys log from the event data recorder. I said, if the IDs match, it proves he paired his phone to the car. And since the logs show the pairing happened at 11:15 while I was inside my apartment, it proves he accessed the vehicle without my knowledge to set up the theft. The room went dead silent. This was not a font argument. This was not a he said, she said. This was hardware. This was a digital fingerprint that could not be cried away. Evan looked at Vance. He looked at Marla. Mom, he squeaked. Marla looked at the screen. She looked at the timestamp. She looked at her son. For the first time in my life, I saw the doubt land. She realized that the misunderstanding was a calculation. She realized he hadn't just borrowed the car. He had engineered the theft. Detective Vance stood up. He walked around the table. Mr. West, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I need you to unlock your phone and place it on the table. No, Evan whispered. Mr. West, if you do not comply, I will seize the device as evidence in an active felony investigation and we will crack it at the lab. It will be easier for everyone if you just put it on the table. Gordon spoke for the first time. Do it, Evan. Evan looked at his father. Gordon's face was gray. He wasn't looking at Evan. He was looking at the wall. Defeated. Evan's hands were shaking so hard he dropped the phone twice before he could unlock it. He slid it across the table. Vance picked it up. He scrolled through the settings. He read a string of numbers aloud. Derek Hanley checked his laptop. Match, Derek said. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Vance looked at Evan. Mr. West, you submitted a falsified text message to a police officer. That is obstruction of justice. You just claimed you had a physical key, but the data proves you used a digital clone. That is perjury. And the telematics show you were driving 112 miles an hour. That is reckless endangerment. Vance pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal rattled. Evan West, please stand up. No. Marla screamed. She grabbed Evan's arm. You cannot. It is a family matter. We will pay Gordon. Write a check. Gordon didn't move. He couldn't write a check. He didn't have the money. The Amex debt was looming. The mortgage was underwater, and the lie had finally run out of credit. Evan stood up. He wasn't smirking anymore. He looked small. He looked terrified. As Vance clicked the cuffs onto his wrists, Evan looked at me. Rory, please, he begged, tears streaming down his face. I am sorry. I am so sorry. Tell them to stop. I looked at him. I felt a phantom ache in my chest. The ghost of the sister I used to be. The sister who would have fixed this. But then I remembered the text. Mom and I remembered the smirk. I remembered the identity theft. I remembered the $24,000 he stole from my future. I stood up. I picked up my binder. I looked him in the eye. I cannot stop the truth. Evan, I said softly, I just delivered it. I turned to my parents. Marla was sobbing into her hands. Gordon was staring at the floor. I walked out of the room. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing the toxicity inside. I stood in the hallway, taking a deep breath of the sterile, precinct air. It wasn't over. There would be court dates. There would be the fallout of the credit card fraud. There would be the inevitable estrangement. But as I walked toward the exit, I realized something. For the first time in 24 years, I wasn't carrying Evan. I was walking alone, and I had never felt lighter. The silence in the interrogation room following the click of the handcuffs was absolute. It was not the quiet of peace. It was the heavy, suffocating vacuum that occurs when a bomb has gone off and the dust is just beginning to settle. Evan sat in the metal chair, his wrists bound behind him, his face a portrait of shattered arrogance. Marla and Gordon sat like statues, their eyes fixed on the son they had bankrupted themselves to protect, unable to comprehend that the script they had followed for 24 years had finally been burned. Detective Vance was not done. He walked back to his desk and picked up a final manila folder. He opened it slowly, letting the sound of the paper sliding against cardboard fill the room. We found something else, Vance said, his voice devoid of theatricality. It was just a fact, a cold, hard fact. He pulled out a series of grainy photographs. We pulled the traffic camera footage from the intersection of Main and Rutherford, 2 blocks from the crash site. Vance explained. The timestamp is 11:45 at night, 3 minutes after the car was unlocked. He placed the photos on the table. I leaned forward. The image showed my Tesla, blurry but unmistakable, stopped at a red light. The streetlights illuminated the cabin. There were 2 people in the car. Evan was in the driver's seat, but in the passenger seat, there was another figure, a young man with a backwards baseball cap. Evan was not alone. Vance said, he had a passenger. We identified him as Kyle Miller. We brought Mr. Miller in for questioning an hour ago. He was very eager to talk once we mentioned that leaving the scene of an accident is a crime. Marla looked up, her eyes wide. Kyle. That is Evan's friend from high school. Vance nodded. Correct. Kyle told us everything. He told us that Evan picked him up to show off the new car. He told us that Evan was bragging about the acceleration, and he told us exactly what Evan said when Kyle asked if he was allowed to be driving it. Vance looked directly at Marla. Kyle asked, Is your sister cool with this? Vance looked at his notes, and Evan replied, and I quote, Do not worry about her. It is my sister's car. But Mom will handle it. Mom and Dad always clean up the mess. The words hung in the air like toxic smoke. Mom and Dad always clean up the mess. That was the missing half of the sentence. That was what he had started to say to me at the crash site. He wasn't saying Mom and Dad will be mad. He was saying Mom and Dad are my employees. They are my cleanup crew. I looked at my mother. For the first time in my life, I saw the illusion break. Marla West had spent decades convincing herself that she was a nurturing mother protecting a sensitive child. But in that moment, hearing those words read by a police detective, she realized she was not a protector. She was a punchline. She was the guarantee that allowed him to be reckless. Evan did not respect her sacrifice. He expected it. He viewed her love as a utility, like electricity or running water, something that existed solely to serve his needs. Marla made a sound that I will never forget. It was a small, choked gasp, like something inside her chest had physically snapped. She looked at Evan. "You said that," she whispered. Evan did not answer. He looked at his lap. "You told your friend that I would clean it up," Marla asked, her voice rising. "Like I am a maid. Like I am a fool." Evan shrugged, a twitchy, nervous motion. "I did not mean it like that. Mom, I just meant you guys always have my back." Gordon stood up. His chair scraped violently against the floor. He walked over to where Evan was sitting. He looked down at his son. "I refinanced the house," Gordon said. His voice was shaking. "I emptied my 401k. I took out a second mortgage to pay for your lawyers, your debts, your mistakes, and you laughed about it. You bragged to your friends that we were your safety net, Dad." "Chill," Evan said, trying to summon a shred of his old bravado. "It is not a big deal." Gordon turned to Detective Vance. "Take him," Gordon said. Gordon Marla cried out. "I said take him." Gordon repeated. He looked at me. His eyes were full of tears, but they were also full of a terrible clarity. "Aurora was right," Gordon said softly. "We did not help him. We created him." The officers guided Evan out of the room. As he passed me, he didn't look at me. He looked at the floor. The golden child was gone. All that was left was a 24-year-old man with a criminal record and a debt he could never repay. The resolution of the case was swift and brutal, driven by the ruthlessness of the data I had provided. The evidence Evan had submitted, the fake text message screenshot, was formally rejected by the district attorney's office. The metadata analysis I provided, combined with the carrier logs, proved it was a fabrication. This added a charge of obstruction of justice to his file. State Farm formally denied liability for Evan. They classified the incident as non-permissive use. This meant my policy would pay out to me, the policyholder, but they would immediately initiate subrogation proceedings against Evan to recover the $130,000. Since Evan had no assets, the financial hammer fell where I knew it would. The subrogation team discovered the co-signed agreements. My parents were liable. They would lose the house. It was a mathematical certainty. The equity was gone. The Amex fraud was a separate investigation. I handed over the file to the federal authorities. Because the amount was over $10,000 and crossed state lines, it was a federal offense. My parents' admission that they knew about the debt and helped him make minimum payments implicated them, but because I chose not to press charges against them specifically for conspiracy, the prosecutor focused solely on Evan. I received the settlement check from State Farm 2 weeks later. It was for $132,000. It was a piece of paper that represented the death of 3 years of my life, and the death of my family as I knew it. I deposited it. I felt no joy. I felt only the cool, clinical satisfaction of a ledger being balanced. At Stonebridge, the storm cleared just as quickly as it had arrived. I sent a final email to Arthur Henderson at Optimus Capital. Subject: resolution of legal matter. Dear Arthur, please be advised that the investigation regarding the vehicle theft has concluded. The perpetrator has been charged, and the falsified social media claims have been retracted as part of the legal settlement. The integrity of my risk assessment remains compromised by nothing. Thank you for your patience. Taryn was standing at my desk when I hit send. You look different, she said. I feel different, I replied. You look like someone who stopped carrying a backpack full of rocks, she said. She was right. For years, I had carried the weight of my brother's potential. I had carried the guilt of my parents' disappointment. I had carried the burden of being the stable one. I had put the rocks down. I saw my parents one last time. It was a Tuesday, 3 weeks after the arrest. I drove to the house in my rental car. There was a for sale sign in the front yard. The house felt smaller. The perfectly manicured lawn looked a little overgrown. Gordon was packing books into boxes in the study. Marla was in the kitchen, wrapping china in newspaper. They looked 10 years older. I stood in the kitchen doorway. "I am not staying." I said. Marla stopped wrapping. She didn't turn around. "He is facing 3 years," she said. Her voice was hollow. "With good behavior. Maybe 18 months. He earned every day of it." I said. She turned around. Her eyes were dull. "We lost the house. Aurora. We are moving into a 2-bedroom apartment on the south side." "I know." I said. "I am not going to offer you money." I continued. "And I'm not going to apologize." I reached into my purse and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000. "This is for the movers," I said, placing it on the counter. "It is not a loan. It is a gift. But that is it. That is the end." Marla looked at the envelope. She didn't touch it. Why, she asked. "Why did you have to push it so far? Because you were going to lie." "Mom," I said, "you looked me in the eye and said you would lie to the police to save him. That was the moment you lost me. I can forgive a mistake. I cannot forgive a conspiracy." Gordon walked into the kitchen. He stood next to Marla. He looked at me with a sad, resigned expression. "We failed you," he said. "Yes," I said. "You did. You failed him too. You loved him so much you forgot to teach him how to be a person." I turned to leave. "I do not hate you," I said, my hand on the door frame. "I still love you. But I love myself enough to not be your collateral damage anymore." I walked out of the house. I walked past the hydrangeas. I walked past the driveway where the Tesla had once sat, gleaming and proud. I did not look back. The final scene of this chapter of my life happened 4 days later. I was at a dealership, but it was not a Tesla dealership. I was done with the hype. I was done with the tech bro status symbols. I was standing in front of a Porsche Taycan Cross Turismo. It was dark blue, a color called gentian blue metallic. It was beautiful, but it felt solid. It felt grounded. The salesman handed me the key. It was heavy in my hand. "You want to take it for a spin?" he asked. I nodded. I slid into the driver's seat. The smell of leather was intoxicating. I gripped the steering wheel. It was firm. I thought about the 1,094 days I had saved for the Tesla. I thought about the ramen noodles. I thought about the freelance shifts. I had lost that car. But as I pressed the start button and the dashboard lit up with a soft, digital glow, I realized I hadn't lost the work, the discipline, the grit, the ability to delay gratification. Evan couldn't steal that. He could crash the metal, but he couldn't crash the woman who earned it. I put the car in drive. I pulled out of the lot. I merged onto the highway. The road stretched out before me, wide and open. I pressed the accelerator. The car surged forward, smooth and powerful. I wasn't driving back to my parents' house to show off. I wasn't driving to Stonebridge to prove a point. I was just driving. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool, conditioned air. I let it out slowly. I had bought back my life. I had bought back my respect. And the price tag was exactly one family drama. Paid in full. I smiled. It wasn't a smirk. It was a real smile. And for the first time in a long time, the road ahead was entirely mine. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey from that crash site to this new car. And I really appreciate you sticking with me through the madness. I would love to hear what you think. Would you have done the same thing if you were in my shoes? Or would you have tried to save the family? Please leave a comment below, letting me know where you are tuning in from. I love reading about where our community is listening. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and if you want to support us even further, hit that hype button so more people can hear the truth about dealing with toxic family dynamics. Stay strong, and remember, never set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm.